The boundary between childhood innocence and supernatural menace finds disturbing expression in the mythology surrounding possessed dolls. This analysis explores the elaborate narrative framework constructed around a particular legendary object, examining themes of vengeful curses, the animation of inanimate objects, and the transformation of protective companions into instruments of terror. For mature audiences, this mythology offers rich material for contemplating fear, guilt, and the disturbing suggestion that malevolence might inhabit the most innocent-seeming objects. The mythology originates in early 20th century Florida, where a household servant allegedly practiced folk magic traditions. According to the narrative, this woman suffered unjust termination from her position and before departing, presented the family's young son with a handcrafted doll. This gift, rather than representing kindness, functioned as vehicle for revenge, a curse disguised as generosity, exploiting the trust between child and caretaker. This origin establishes several crucial thematic elements. The doll becomes weapon wielded by the powerless against those with authority, suggesting how systemic injustice might generate supernatural consequences. The servant's knowledge of occult practices provides mechanism for transformation, while the child's innocence makes him unwitting participant in adult conflicts he cannot comprehend. The mythology frames the curse as consequence of social cruelty, raising uncomfortable questions about collective responsibility for individual suffering. The specific choice of doll as curse vessel carries symbolic weight. Dolls occupy liminal space in human psychology, simultaneously comforting companions and unsettling human replicas. Their fixed expressions suggest frozen emotions. Their immobility implies potential for movement. Their resemblance to humans highlights their fundamental otherness. These inherent tensions make dolls ideal objects for horror narratives, embodying anxieties about the boundaries between living and non-living, animate and inanimate, safe and threatening. The mythology describes gradual escalation of supernatural activity following the doll's introduction into the household. Initial manifestations remain ambiguous, unexplained sounds, doors moving without obvious cause, nocturnal disturbances that might admit rational explanation. This gradual progression mirrors realistic patterns of how people accommodate increasingly strange phenomena, normalizing each new oddity until the cumulative effect becomes undeniable. The boy's relationship with the doll develops into unhealthy attachment that persists throughout his life. He names the object after himself, creating identity confusion between child and toy. He insists the doll acts independently, displaying agency and even malicious intent. Adults dismiss these claims as imaginative play or attention-seeking, their rational frameworks preventing acknowledgement of genuine supernatural occurrence. This tension between child testimony and adult skepticism appears frequently in possession narratives, suggesting children's perceptual openness makes them more vulnerable to supernatural influence. Neighbors report observing the doll in windows when the house should be empty, positioned as if watching the street. These external witnesses provide validation beyond the immediate family, suggesting the phenomenon extends beyond household dynamics into broader community awareness. The mythology uses these multiple perspectives to establish credibility, implying that numerous independent observers cannot all be mistaken or delusional. The persistence across lifespan. What distinguishes this mythology from temporary haunting narratives is the lifelong nature of the attachment. The boy grows into adulthood yet cannot separate from the doll, treating it as an essential component of his identity. His wife reports the object seems to observe her, that its position changes when unwatched, that the atmosphere around it feels oppressive and hostile. The husband's defense of the doll against his wife's concerns demonstrates how the curse operates, not through obvious possession, but through normalized attachment that appears voluntary even as it destroys normal relationships. This long-term attachment raises questions about the nature of the curse. Does the doll itself harbor malevolent entity? Or does it function as focus for the boy's psychological damage, manifesting internal trauma as external threat? The mythology remains deliberately ambiguous, allowing both supernatural and psychological interpretations. The doll might contain actual spirit, or it might serve as an object onto which the man projects aspects of himself he cannot consciously acknowledge. The servants who work in the household as the boy ages into adulthood report the doll's clothing becomes soiled as if through actual activity, despite remaining in fixed location. Outdoor sightings occur when no one admits moving the object. These details suggest independent mobility, implying the curse enables genuine animation rather than mere psychological projection. The mythology builds systematic case for supernatural explanation through accumulation of inexplicable details that resist rational interpretation. Following the original owner's death, subsequent occupants of the residence experience similar phenomena, establishing that the curse attaches to the object rather than specific individual. A young girl's traumatic encounter claiming the doll, attempted physical harm during sleep precipitates the decision to remove the object from private residence and donate it to museum custody. This transition from private to public possession represents an attempt to contain and neutralize the threat through institutional management. The museum setting transforms the doll from private curse into public spectacle. Behind protective glass, it becomes object of curiosity rather than immediate danger, though the mythology insists its malevolent power persists despite physical barriers. Staff report continued strange phenomena, apparent movement within the case, equipment malfunctions, whispered sounds, temperature fluctuations. The institutional context provides scientific framework for investigation, while simultaneously highlighting the inadequacy of rational methodology for addressing supernatural threat. The mythology introduces concept of photographic taboo. Visitors must request permission before photographing the doll, or suffer consequences. This detail merges folk magic traditions about capturing souls through imagery with modern technology, suggesting the curse adapts to contemporary contexts. Those who disregard this protocol allegedly experience misfortunes, equipment failures, accidents, illnesses, even deaths. The causal connection remains unprovable, yet the accumulation of reported incidents creates patterns suggesting genuine supernatural agency. Perhaps the mythology's most fascinating element involves the letters of apology sent to the museum by visitors who mocked or disrespected the doll. These communications, reportedly numbering in hundreds, describe misfortunes befalling those who treated the object with contempt, expressing genuine terror and pleading for curse removal. The letters themselves allegedly display supernatural characteristics, moving independently, falling from walls when the doll is mentioned, creating physical manifestations of the curse's ongoing operation. This phenomenon reveals how belief structures operate within possession narratives. The apology letters demonstrate that even skeptics, after experiencing unexplained misfortunes, retrospectively attribute causation to their interaction with the cursed object. Whether the doll actually causes these problems, or whether psychological expectation creates pattern recognition that links unrelated events becomes irrelevant. The belief itself generates real behavioral consequences and genuine fear. The museum's maintenance of the letters as physical evidence creates meta-textual layer to the mythology. These documents function as testimonials, building case for supernatural authenticity through accumulated personal narratives. They transform individual experiences into collective validation, suggesting that multiple independent witnesses reporting similar patterns indicates genuine phenomenon rather than mass delusion or coincidence. The mythology incorporates paranormal investigators and occult practitioners who examine the doll, lending specialized authority to claims of supernatural presence. These experts report sensing multiple entities, perhaps the child's spirit whose innocence was exploited, combined with something older and more fundamentally malevolent. This layered possession suggests the curse operates on multiple levels, with surface manifestation concealing deeper, more dangerous presence. The discovery of ritual materials within the doll's construction, bone fragments, human ashes, specific arrangements suggesting voodoo or hoodoo traditions, provides physical evidence linking the object to occult practices. These findings bridge supernatural claims and material reality, suggesting the servant's curse operated through genuine magical methodology rather than mere psychological suggestion. The specific cultural traditions referenced connect the narrative to authentic folk magic practices, lending anthropological credibility to fantastic claims. Some investigators refuse to return after examining the doll, their reactions suggesting they encountered something that fundamentally challenged their understanding of reality. Others provide detailed analyses of the entity's nature and intentions, describing it as both protective and vengeful, guarding the original boy while simultaneously punishing anyone it perceives as threatening. This complex characterization elevates the entity beyond simple malevolence into something more psychologically sophisticated and therefore more disturbing. The mythology establishes clear pattern connecting disrespect toward the doll with subsequent misfortune. Those who mock, challenge, or attempt to harm the object allegedly suffer accidents, illnesses, psychological disturbances, or worse. Staff members who handle it improperly experience immediate consequences: injuries, equipment failures, inexplicable phenomena that seem calibrated as punishments fitting their specific transgressions. This cause and effect structure transforms the doll into moral arbiter, enforcing respect through supernatural sanction. The mythology suggests the entity possesses agency and judgment, distinguishing between sincere visitors and those intending harm or mockery. This discriminating capability implies consciousness and intentionality beyond simple reactive haunting, suggesting genuine intelligence directing the supernatural manifestations. The most disturbing accounts involve delayed consequences, misfortunes occurring weeks or months after museum visits, yet retrospectively attributed to the doll encounter. Visitors report being stalked by shadows, hearing childlike laughter in their homes, seeing button-eyed figures in peripheral vision. These ongoing hauntings suggest the curse doesn't remain geographically confined, but can attach to individuals and follow them, extending its influence far beyond the museum's physical location. The feeding mechanism. Advanced interpretations of the mythology propose the entity feeds on fear itself, growing stronger through accumulated dread and the spreading of its legend. Each retelling, each visitor, each letter of apology contributes energy to the curse, maintaining and amplifying its power. This self-perpetuating quality makes the entity essentially immortal as long as people know and fear it. It continues existing and potentially strengthening. This feeding mechanism creates disturbing implications about the relationship between belief and supernatural reality. If fear itself empowers the entity, then attempting to contain it through awareness paradoxically strengthens it. The mythology suggests that spreading the story, even with cautionary intent, serves the entity's purposes by maintaining its presence in collective consciousness. Those who learn about the doll become potential victims simply through awareness of its existence. The museum's role becomes ambiguous within this framework. Does institutional custody genuinely contain the threat, or does public display maximize the doll's exposure and therefore its power? The mythology doesn't resolve this tension, leaving open the disturbing possibility that well-intentioned containment actually serves the entity's purposes by providing steady stream of fearful visitors whose emotions feed its continued existence. The mythology incorporates meta-narrative about how the real story inspired commercial horror entertainment, but with significant alterations that diluted its genuine terror. The film adaptation transformed folk curse into serial killer's soul transfer, adding humor and reducing psychological impact. This translation process allegedly angered the actual entity, which punished those involved in creating the commercialized version through accidents and misfortunes. This aspect of the mythology operates on multiple levels. It explains why mainstream audiences don't recognize the film character's connection to genuine cursed object, suggesting deliberate suppression of authentic origins. It also frames entertainment industry's appropriation of folk horror as potentially dangerous, implying that trivializing genuine supernatural threats invites consequences. The mythology suggests Hollywood's transformation of terror into comedy represents disrespect that the entity actively resents and punishes. The reported difficulties during filming equipment failures, strange sounds, crew accidents mirror phenomena reported at the museum, suggesting the entity's influence extends beyond its physical location to affect those who invoke its story. This demonstrates the curse's adaptability and reach, its capacity to respond to provocations occurring far from its geographic origin. The mythology implies that even fictional representations create connections through which supernatural influence can operate. Unlike mythologies that conclude with exorcism or destruction, this narrative emphasizes the entity's continued existence and activity. The doll remains on display, still allegedly manifesting supernatural phenomena, still receiving apology letters, still inspiring fear in visitors. This open-ended structure suggests the curse cannot be resolved through conventional means. It persists indefinitely, waiting behind glass with fixed expression and patient malevolence. The mythology proposes that the entity chooses its victims deliberately, studying visitors and selecting those it wishes to afflict. This discriminating intelligence makes it more frightening than random haunting. It suggests conscious malevolence, strategic planning, and personal attention from something that should not possess such capabilities. Visitors leave with sensation of being watched and evaluated, uncertainty about whether they've attracted unwanted supernatural attention. Local legends maintain that even removing the doll from its original residence didn't end that location's haunting. The house allegedly remains disturbed, with shadows and laughter persisting despite the object's absence. This suggests the curse saturated the environment itself, or that multiple entities were involved, or that the doll's presence created permanent dimensional weakness, allowing supernatural manifestation. Regardless of explanation, the implication remains disturbing. Some curses prove too powerful for any containment strategy. This elaborate mythology demonstrates how narratives about cursed objects tap into fundamental anxieties about the boundaries between living and non-living, about whether malevolence can inhabit innocent-seeming forms, about our vulnerability to supernatural threats we cannot rationally comprehend or effectively combat. The story resonates because it exploits specific fears about childhood objects turned dangerous, about curses that persist across generations, about the inadequacy of institutional or rational responses to supernatural phenomena. For mature audiences, the mythology offers contemplation of serious themes disguised as supernatural horror. It addresses questions about justice and revenge, about whether wrongs can generate consequences that transcend normal causation, about the relationship between belief and reality, about how fear itself might constitute genuine danger, regardless of whether its ostensible cause proves objectively real. The cursed doll endures in cultural imagination, not despite, but because of its disturbing implications. It represents the possibility that our world contains genuinely malevolent forces, that innocuous objects might harbor terrible threats, that some curses cannot be broken or contained, that our rational frameworks prove inadequate for addressing certain categories of experience. Whether interpreted as literal supernatural threat or psychological projection of cultural anxieties, the mythology maintains power to disturb and fascinate those willing to contemplate the darker possibilities it represents. The doll waits behind its glass, fixed smile suggesting knowledge we cannot access, consciousness we cannot confirm or deny, malevolence we can neither prove nor entirely dismiss. And in that uncertainty lies the mythology's enduring power to unsettle and compel continued attention across generations.